Good morning everyone. Today, my team and I are going to present a case study on the Mars Climate Orbiter failure. This spacecraft was launched by NASA on December 11, 1998 to study the weather and the climate on Mars. It was supposed to help by acting as a communication link to another lander on Mars. However, on September 23, 1999, just before it entered Mars orbit, NASA lost contact with the orbiter. Later, they found out that the problem was a unit mistake. One of the team used imperial units like pounds, while the other used metric units like newtons. Because of this issue, the spacecraft went too close to Mars and likely burned up in the atmosphere. This mistake shows how even a small error can cause big failure, especially when there is poor communication and no proper checking. Now, I'll pass it to my teammates who will explain more about the technical and ethical lessons behind this failure. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam. I'm going to share about the chronology of the incidents. The MCO was launched in late 1998 to study climate and serve as communication relay for the Mars Polar Lander. The orbiter insertion and aerobraking process had to be completed before the Polar Lander arrived to allow communication with the lander. During the first 4 months after launch, the MCO suffered from ground navigation software issue, forcing NASA team to rely on email updates from the contractor to track the spacecraft. Although the software problem was eventually resolved, another navigation data was observed but only discussed informally. On September 1999, the final course adjustment TCM4 was executed as planned to prepare for Mars orbit insertion. However, updated calculations just an hour before the orbiter entry showed that the spacecraft might dip as low as 110 kilometers, dangerously close to the Martian atmosphere. Then, an emergency correction TCM5 was considered but cancelled to avoid disrupting the Mars Polar Lander mission. On September 23, as the orbiter approached Mars, the contact was lost 49 seconds earlier than expected and it was never regained. Post-failure analysis estimated that the spacecraft altitude at just 57 kilometers, resulting in its disruption in Mars' upper atmosphere.
Hi, my name is Uzaizat, and now I will be explaining the technical engineering issues that contributed to the failure of the Mars Climate Orbiter in 1999. As mentioned earlier by Adam, the main cause was a unit conversion error. However, there were several other technical factors that contributed to the mission's loss. First, poor system integration and lack of verification allowed the mistake to go undetected. The software output wasn't cross-checked against document unit standards, and no end-to-end tests were done to validate the data accuracy. Second, during the critical phase, engineers bypassed official software due to formatting issues and relied instead on informal data via email. This was a very risky move that let errors persist. Next, when calculation revealed that the orbiter was dangerously low at 110 km, the team discussed a last-minute correction maneuver, but due to unclear procedures and scheduling concerns, they did not execute it. Lastly, under NASA Faster Better Cheaper initiative, the project suffered from all limited staffing, poor documentation, and minimal cross-team communication, all of which weakened the mission's reliability.
Assalamualaikum, I am Christina and I'll be explaining the ethical reasons behind the failure of Mars Climate Orbiter. One of the most critical issues was the lack of proper communications between NASA and Lockheed Martin. Engineers noticed trajectory anomalies but failed to escalate them formally. This directly violates the Engineers Act, which requires engineers to report any risk to public safety or project success. Secondly, there was a lack of verification and diligence. The documentation clearly stated the metric units must be used, but no one ensured this was followed. Ethical engineering demands throughout checking, especially when human lives or national resources are at stakes. The team was also undertaken and overworked, operating without sufficient supervision. According to the Engineers Act, engineers must work within their competence and mentor other than to maintain professional standards. Finally, when warning signs appeared before the orbiter failures, there was no structured response. No one took responsibility or initiated a corrective action. That's a failure in ethical accountability.
Hello, I'm Siti Nur Shahada. The failure of the MCO was not just a unit conversion mistake, but it reflects deeper issues like miscommunication, weak validation, and lack of ethical oversight. To prevent similar failures, here are key recommendations. First, standardize unit across all teams using SI units and automated check to catch conversion errors early. Second, enforce strong verifications and validations where all critical systems must be fully tested and integrated before launch. Third, improve communications. Clear protocols should allow engineers to escalate concerns without hesitations. Fourth, prioritize engineering ethics. Teams should be trained to act with responsibility and transparency, supported by an ethic review board. Next, ensure proper staffing. Overworked teams lead to oversight, so training and supervisions are essential. We should also simulate worst-case scenarios to prepare for last-minute decisions. And finally, enforce strict documentations and version control to avoid misalignment between teams. In short, the MCO failures teach us that mission success depends on both technical discipline and ethical responsibility. So that's all for my part. Thank you.
To conclude, the Mars Climate Orbiter failure teaches us that even a small mistakes like using the wrong unit can lead to a complete loss of mission. This wasn't just a technical error, but also a result of poor communications, lack of checking, and not following a clear procedures. As a future engineers, this case reminds us how important it is to work carefully, communicate clearly, and also always double check the work, especially when working with the different teams. Engineering isn't just about building things, it's also being responsible, honest, and making sure everything is safe and correct. Let this be a lesson that success in engineering depends not only in skills, but also teamwork, ethics, and attention to detail. Thank you.